Okay. First, just a word on Yom Kippur and Erev Yom Kippur in general, specifically. Dramatic tefillah we have tonight that everybody comes to is Kol Nidrei. And people often ask, when they read the translation, they feel a little underwhelmed. What's so exciting about Kol Nidrei? Translation is an annulment of vows, very similar to that which we've done on Erev Rosh Hashanah. Before Rosh Hashanah we have a Beth Din and you annul vows. So why the drama? Why is it so dramatic? So begin with just historically, and this will help you understand the content also. Historically, Kol Nidrei itself was always part of the service, so far as I know, but to my understanding, it's become dramatized, specifically, as a result of the Spanish Inquisition. And the reason why the Spanish Inquisition popularized it and made it so central and so big is because, of course, the Inquisition which lasted for over a century.
They made us convert.
Which was, Jews were forcibly converted before the Inquisition, and the Inquisition was instituted because they correctly doubted the truth and the honesty with which these Jews converted. Now, the Jews who hadn't converted were not under the Inquisition. They were later expelled, but they weren't under the Inquisition. The Inquisition was specifically for Jews who forcibly converted and were suspect, most times correctly, for not being true to their conversions. And this Inquisition went for intergenerational, imagine for a century, child to child to child to child, and they're all faking their Christianity. It's an incredible thing, an incredible story, and how that happened, because it's not as if your child was born at 1 year old and was told, by the way, you're Jewish. They were afraid the kid would go to the yard and tell the friend, hey, we're Jewish. They'd wait till they were somewhat older. So imagine a kid grows up, he thinks he's Christian, 18, 19 years old, finds out he's really Jewish, marries another one of those hidden Jews, and then does the same thing for his kids for over a century. It's an amazing thing.
Practice, or? So
they did hidden practice. There's certain practices they couldn't do. For example, circumcision was a difficult one because it's seen, and there's some record of at least some women, I don't know if it was universal, but some women who would cut a piece of their own skin in their forearm to remind them that their children deserve a bris. Even though they didn't give one, that one day when they will be able to, they'll give their children a circumcision. We can go on with this forever, but it's even happened where, let's say, a Jew left Spain, and then he left Spain, so he somehow got out and he figured, okay, now I can live freely as a Jew. And then the Inquisition arrived there, somewhere in Italy or in England, and now he's stuck. He can't go back to saying, I was always a Christian. When you left us, you started behaving like a Jew. At any rate, in this whole era is when Kol Nidrei became very popularized and dramatized. It became such a central thing. Why? Because here are Jews who have throughout the year promised and vowed that they're followers of Christianity, and they're coming to Yom Kippur. They want to annul those vows. They want to come to God and say, we were always with you. And thus they annulled their vows in this great and dramatic way, to state that they never really meant it when they were saying those words, and their true loyalty lies with God, and therefore they're coming in Yom Kippur with that true loyalty, and thus Kol Nidrei became such a big and central thing during that era. If we can broaden this is what Chassidus does in general, is we can think of it in such a way that Kol Nidrei, and likewise Ataras Nedarim, is not just the releasing of halachic vows, but releasing oneself of habits that tie oneself down. Read the description, talks about esarana, things that tie you down, things that hold you back. In other words, a person wants to renew himself, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, come to a new year and take a new path. So it's very nice to commit oneself to a new path, but it's very difficult to actually go down that path if a person still feels tied and is still attached to old habits and to old behaviors and patterns, and either self-imposed habits or imposed by social pressure, or imposed by the perceived notion of what social pressure is. But either way, a person gets into patterns that aren't necessarily, where a person admittedly acknowledges that these patterns of behavior are no good, and it's difficult to get out of them. It's difficult to move forward without getting out of them. And in a way, that's what Kol Nidrei is. Declaring that all these things that I've been attached to, all these things that I've defined myself by, it's not who I am. And then a person can go in Yom Kippur and truly dedicate himself to the service of Hashem. And in a way, that is the avodah of Erev Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, Kol Nidrei being the switch between Erev Yom Kippur and Yom Kippur itself. Like you read in today's Hayom Yom, that Erev Yom Kippur, the service is to regret the past. It's to let go of the old way. And then comes Yom Kippur. After a person lets go of the old way, a person can truly commit himself to going forward, to being his new self.
If the person has put a gun to his head and says, you switch to Christianity or you get shot, and he says, I'll switch to Christianity, and then he knows all his void.
I'm not telling you what you should do halachically. That's a separate discussion, which we've talked about. And in our history, we have it's very colored. And anyway, we're gonna leave that out for now, because it's not very pleasant history.
But what's
on that
the
question.
Torah's attitude toward a vow, a promise made under duress? Why go through the whole declaration of Kol Nidrei if, in fact, like Alan was saying,
Who's under duress?
Someone puts a gun to my head. Hashem knows. I didn't mean it. It was under duress.
So there's, first of all, like I said before, Kol Nidrei was already existed before. They dramatized it in connection with this idea. That's number one. Number two, as I mentioned before, some people grew up Christian, didn't find out till they were 18, 19 years old they weren't Christians. Now they really had to annul their vows, because they didn't mean it when they were 15, 16, 17. They meant it because that's what they thought they were. Right? And aside the fact that from halach, I don't want to, God forbid, cast people in history in negative light, but going forward, hopefully we'll never have to implement this halacha. But the halacha is not to bow, whatever the consequences, be with whatever the consequences may be. And during that period, during the Spanish Inquisition, many did take that route. I don't know the numbers, but many did take that route. Right? The forced conversions happened before the Inquisition, as I mentioned, 1390 somewhere, or 1380 somewhere, late 1300s. That's when those forced conversions happened. Many Jews died, did not take it. Others survived, and others went the fake conversion way. If you go to like the Rhinelands, the Ashkenazic places, they had Jews who preemptively took their own lives before they were forcibly converted, because they knew it was going to be torture. I mean, you're talking about a test that God willing will never have to go through, but it's a test that in reality throughout history we have gone through, and many withstood the test. And even those who didn't withstand, even those who took the fake conversion, as I mentioned, they went through pains and risk and torture to maintain the fact that secretly they were Jewish. So even those who caved to the pressure, it's not as if they caved to the pressure, now their lives were hunky-dory, yay, we're now Christians. It's not exactly what it looked like. They had the persecution of the Inquisition more than the Jews who didn't give in. So that's the reality of the halacha and the history. God willing, we'll never have to.
What does Hashem want on this? Does he want us to give up our lives just to say a lie?
Just to prevent saying a lie? That's what the halacha says?
To save a lie.
To save a life.
No, to say a lie to save your life.
Rather than say a lie to save your life, in this instance, that's the halacha. What God gets out of it, I don't know. You can daven every day to Hashem and ask Him what in the world He gets out of this whole exile thing. Which is a great segue to the Gemara. We're talking about waiting for Moshiach's coming. Okay. Okay, where are we? Chesed Beis already. 98b. So yesterday we discussed, we were introduced to at least two sages so far. One sage who said, I'd be happy to sit in the shadow of the dung of Moshiach's donkey. Meaning to say, I'll take the extreme humiliation and pain, but let me live to Moshiach's day. And we had others, Ullah and Rabbi Yochanan, I think it was, Ullah and Rabbi, who said that they would let it happen, but not in my day. And we suggested yesterday that just like in pregnancy, the full-term pregnancy is the easiest and least painful. And therefore, perhaps this is why these sages said, let it happen, but not in my day, knowing that if it would happen in a day, it would be very painful because of how radical the change would be. But now the conversation continues. So the line begins with the word the kufse, the chamre, and then the third word is amarle. It's about 10 or so lines down from the top of the page. Amarle abaye l'rava. You'll see parentheses and then square brackets. It's right before that. Amarle abaye l'rava. Abaye says to Rabba, my timer, why is it that you're happy for Moshiach to come, but it shouldn't happen in your day? So ilema, should you suggest mishum chevle shel Moshiach, because you're worried, as we described, of the birth pangs of Moshiach's coming. So says Abaye, for you, this should not be an issue of concern. You shouldn't be concerned with the birth pangs of Moshiach. Why is that? Because Vahatanya, we've learned in the Mishnaic age text, which reads, Shalu Talmud of Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah. The students of Rabbi Lezer, sorry, I don't know why I had Rabbi Azariah. Rabbi Lezer. Shalu Talmud of Rabbi Lezer. The students of Rabbi Lezer asked of him, Ma yasa adam, what should someone do? Be a natzal, and he should save himself, mechevle shel Mashiach, of the birth pangs of Mashiach. So he answered, Rabbi Lezer responded, Yasik b'Torah, let him involve himself in Torah study, uv'gmilas chasadim, and in acts of kindness. So, therefore, says Abaye, Umar, and you, Master, Rabba, HaTorah, v'gmilas chasadim. You have both Torah and kindness. So what are you worried about? You're not going to be struck by the you won't suffer from the birth pangs of Mashiach. So Amalei, so Rabbi responded, Shema Yigir Machet. I'm not so self-confident as you might think. Perhaps there's some sin that would have caused me not to, which would take away my ability to protect myself against the birth pangs of Moshiach. This is a very similar conversation to the conversation quoted right in the first chapter of Tanya between these two sages, Rabba and Abaye, where Rabba said, I am a Beinani. And Abaye tells him, what do you mean you're a Beinani? If you're a Beinani, then what are the rest of us? And as we learned in Tanya at length, that Rabba was able to speak himself into thinking that he was a Beinani, notwithstanding the fact that he knows he never sinned, at least not in the simple classic way. Right? Famously, as the Rambam, as Alter Rebbe quotes there, Rabba, the angel of death couldn't get a hold of Rabba because he was constantly studying, and he had to get distracted, kind of like similar to King David. So, but nonetheless, Tanya explains that a Beinani is one who indeed never sins, but does so out of self-control, whereas a tzaddik is one who never sins because doesn't want to sin. And even a Beinani, says the Alter Rebbe, during prayer could feel some love for Hashem to the point where he doesn't want to sin. And therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, that Rabbi viewed himself as a Beinani who's davening all day long. Not that he truly is the real tzaddik. And therefore he views himself as a Beinani in that, it's very possible I'll sin any moment. And maybe, perhaps, this is what's similar to what's being said here, where Rabbi says, Shema Yigir Machet, that, I don't know, maybe I'm not worthy of avoiding the birth pangs of Mashiach, notwithstanding knowing the great level he stands on. And there is precedent for this. Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, as a statement made by Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi. Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi Rami, Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi raised the following seeming contradiction in the texts. Ksiv, the verse reads, Behold, says God to Yaakov our forefather, I am with you, and I will guard you whenever you do. The Ksiv, and then later it says, when Yaakov is about to approach his brother Esav, the verse says, Vayar Yaakov ma'od, and Vayera Yaakov ma'od, and Yaakov was exceedingly afraid. Vayitzer lo, and he felt constrained. So what's going on? How is it possible? God promises you're going to be okay, and then later on he's afraid. What is this? So says the Gemara, says Yaakov was worried that maybe between God's promise to protect him and the time when he actually met Esav, maybe there was some sort of sin that caused him to lose the protection from Hashem. The truth is, there's a medrash which describes whether or not it was a positive thing that Yaakov was afraid in his humility, or actually casts it in a negative, in somewhat of a negative light, in that he should have been confident in God's protection and shouldn't have been afraid. There's a medrash like that, and I think Rashi in the Chumash actually even quotes both opinions. If I'm not
At that level, the humility, I'm sure you're
At that-
afraid no matter
Yeah, so
the
that's
level you're at.
right. So the Rebbe has a famous talk on this. It's actually the talk that we mentioned once before, where the Rebbe explains about the think good and it'll be good, and that a person's faith and trust in Hashem that it will be good is in and of itself enough for reward that it will be good. And that talk is actually built on, or built around, this discussion about Yaakov Avinu and thinking perhaps sin is caused that I lose God's protection. And there talked about these two ideas, whether it's a positive or a negative trait. And if my memory serves me correctly, the point that it makes there is that the humility of Yaakov is that he doesn't trust his own trust in Hashem. Not that he doesn't trust Hashem's protection, but that if protection comes as a result of the Jew's trust in Hashem, he's worried that his trust in Hashem isn't absolute, or something to that effect. Anyway, so here the Gemara is saying that Rabbi feel the same way, that maybe there's some sort of sin that would make him lose the protection against the birth pangs of Moshiach. And the Gemara continues in proof. Sorry.
Just make sure. Am I understanding correct? This discussion is about some sort of if you want to avoid the birth pangs of Moshiach, which obviously are difficult. So there's a sanctuary. The sanctuary being Torah and the acts of Chesed. If you
That's the way the Gemara seems to put it.
Into that sort of cocoon, you can be
insulated. That's a very good question. So the simple reading seems like that. What should a person do? He should save himself, as if like he's isolating himself. I'd like to think it's more expansive, because I wouldn't think Rabbi would say, yeah, you know what, let me go into that little bubble and let everybody else suffer. Perhaps it's more to the effect of if either he individually can inspire everybody else to be in that sense, then he can avoid the whole thing altogether. But I don't think I'd be hard pressed to think that Rabbi is talking about an escapism while he's okay with everybody else suffering. Even though it has to be with someone else anyway. You have to test someone else. Yeah, but I do kind of tell the people. But that's actually a good point. Yeah. If the person's a Gemel Chesed, he's looking to see kindness, then he wouldn't be the kind of person who's okay with everybody else suffering while he's happily in this cocoon. But the literal language, the literal language does sound like Vaynatzel, he's saving himself. But Vaynatzel could be more expansive. Vaynatzel, and the collective will be saved. Exactly. Yeah. And Abaye is telling Rabbi, we think you're great enough to make this happen without. And he says, I'm not so sure that I'm capable of carrying the whole generation like that. Maybe that's what he means.
Yeah. That's where the Ramban extends also the discussion with Yaakov. How could he be afraid? Hashem promised him.
Because there are others.
He was sure he would be saved. But what about his children? How many would he lose? That was fear.
That's right. There's a Ramban in that as well. Rashi doesn't go that way, but the Ramban does that way. That's correct.
So chet doesn't mean personally. It means
collectively.
That's bad. Same with Moshiach. Right?
But actually, Rabbi's talking about him. Could be talking about. Either way. In calling himself as a Benini, you can say he's talking about himself also. In other words, I don't think I'm capable enough of carrying it for everybody else.
Exactly.
That's also possible.
It's a crass analogy where it's like a sports team. The star can play well, but can he cover the whole team?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah, maybe like that.
Can he play well enough that he can?
Yeah.
So the Torah communities that insulate themselves, even today, I would think they would look to that Gemara as a justification.
I'm sure many would.
Right.
I'm sure many would. Yeah.
But that's true. We're judged as a whole. That's the problem. That's the downfall of that argument, because
besides for the
we're judged as a whole. So even if you have a certain element that are righteous,
it goes even deeper.
Not influenced. We're all judged in the same boat. So.
It goes in a way deeper than that. And God forbid we have to go to Erev Yom Kippur. I don't want to speak negatively about any Jews in any other way. Just talk about the positive, in that a person's individual relationship with Hashem is intrinsically tied up with his relationship with other Yidden. As we kind of alluded to before, this person has to have Torah and Gemilas Chasadim. So a person can't say, it's not as if a person can say, you know what, I have Torah, I'm lacking Gemilas Chasadim, okay, so I'm at least have 50%. That's not the way it is. His Torah is called into question if he's lacking Gemilas Chasadim. And likewise in the reverse, a person who has Gemilas Chasadim, the truth is actually, anyway, a person who has Gemilas Chasadim without Torah, his Gemilas Chasadim might also be called into question. Although, if either one is done correctly, they'll lead to the other automatically. A person who's learning Torah because it's God's Torah, will inevitably lead to be helping other Jews. And a person who's helping other Jews because these are God's Jews will inevitably be learning Torah also, because they're truly intrinsically one entity.
Yeah, Torah,
That's correct.
Yeah, you have to integrate all three. But there are people, by the way, unfortunately, get caught in what when they get.
It's Erev Yom Kippur. I won't have to speak about other.
No, we're just.
Okay, so let's just conclude this Gemara, where the Gemara says like this. Where the Gemara says like this. So, what's the proof that there is at least a possibility that the redemption avoids the birth pangs? The Tanya, the verse reads, quoting a verse which says, Ad Yavar Amcha Hashem. The verse reads, Ad Yavar Amcha Hashem, Ad Yavar Amzukun Nisa. It's a part of the Oz Yasher. We read it every day. And we're talking about, the word Ad has like a futuristic connotation to it, in that there will be a time when God will pass over. Yavar Amcha Hashem, Hashem will bring over your people. And it says twice, He'll bring over your people twice. Ad Yavar Amcha Hashem, Ad Yavar Amzukun Nisa. And it's Ad means like, till that time. It has like a future connotation, even though the literal meaning is probably talking about that time, going out of Egypt. But nonetheless, it has a kind of futuristic connotation to it. And therefore it says that the Gemara reads like this. Ad Yavar Amcha Hashem, the first time when it says when God will bring in his people, Zubir Deshona. This is the first time they entered the land of Israel under Joshua. Ad Yavar Amzukun Nisa, and then the second half of the verse which says again, until you bring over your acquired nation, meaning God carrying over the Jewish people into Israel. Zubir Shnia is a reference to the second entrance. And the way Rashi reads it, it's talking about Ezra at the time when the Jews returned at the second temple. Emra Mayata, that means to say, from the fact that the verse puts the two together, that the entrance to Israel, the second time under Ezra, could have been miraculous and total in the same way it was the first time. The first time the Jews went into Israel, it was miraculous battles where they gained full autonomy and they established their own kingdom with mighty armies and Torah flourishing until they messed up. But at least when they entered the land of Israel, that's the way it was. And says the Gemara that because the verse compares the two together and describing God bringing the Jewish people in twice, consecutively, the same thing could have happened the second time when the Jews came to the land of Ezra. But the reality is when the Jews came to the land of Israel with Ezra, they were only semi-autonomous, and only for a brief period after Hanukkah they were autonomous a little bit. Very quickly became vassal states again. It was not complete in that many Jews stayed behind. According to some views, even a majority of Jews stayed behind. Some views say there was a majority in Israel to begin with. They were just very poor. There's different opinions about exactly the history of where Jews were at the time. But certainly when Ezra returned to Israel, it was not a complete restoration of both the sovereign state, the halachic and spiritual state of the Jewish people. It wasn't as complete as it was the first time. But from the fact that the verse compares the two means it could have been that way. Ella, but Shagar Machet.
Should have been that way. Really.
It should have been this way. But Ella Shagar Machet, but sin caused that it should not be that way. However, the third and final redemption is Gula She'enachara Golas. It's what we used to always say, that we would merit the Geula HaMiktis V'Ashlema, the true and complete redemption. Unlike the redemption of the time of Ezra, which was true in some sense, but certainly incomplete. The final redemption, as described actually in this past week's parsha in Rashi, where God says He takes every Jew by the hand. It's complete, full, and wholesome. All Jews, like Rabbi would say, Shleimus HaTorah, full, complete Torah. Shleimus HaAm, the completion of the people, and Shleimus HaAretz, the complete land. In this everlasting unity of a full, wholesome one people, and the full, wholesome one land of Israel, and the full, wholesome one Torah, with our full, wholesome one God. May we merit that without any further delay. Genik Shein. And a good bench year. And it'll be, God willing, a very good year for everybody.
Amen.